Thank you, Dr. Mahgoub. Today we heard the four presenters' presentations. The first presenter, Dr. Seongsil Kim, present brand new heat pump systems from LG Electronics, especially specialized for tall office and residential buildings. And the second presenter, Mr. John Sullivan-Fedock, he showed the CFD application for optimizing wind power generation systems integrate with building facade and mass sort of architectural components. And third presenter, Ms. Chaanah Bahk, presented SK ENC's latest green buildings project, Eco Lab, for SK Chemicals. This building got a LEED Platinum rating, and she introduced several impressive state-of-the-art green building technologies. And the last presenter, Yasser Mahgoub, indicated impacts of tall buildings in social and regional points of view. So if you have any questions, give your question to each presenter freely. Any questions?
Yes. So maybe we can have the presenters come up to the stage and respond to the questions as they come.
Yeah, it's for Professor Yasser Mahgoub. Yeah. I was just in Doha last week, and
Come up to the microphone, if you will, so that it can
Yeah.
be recorded and everybody can hear. Yes.
yeah, I was just in Doha last week. There was a conference on humanization of future cities. I was an urban planner in Dubai in 1977 till 81. Of course, this morning we had a lot of good lessons to learn from Dubai, especially Burj Khalifa. And I've been in Dubai from 77 till 2009 as urban planner and architect. And many of the mistakes made seems to be repeated all over again in Doha.
That's true.
Like, for instance, the seminar last week was talking about humanizing the city, making it more walkable, integrating the buildings, having more of a family of buildings, the big imbalance between place of work and place of residence, where you have Wall Street style, a la New York Wall Street, surrounded by Beverly Hills gated communities. So there's a big imbalance between jobs and housing. At the same time, there seems to be a pressure to build more roads. You build more roads, you get more cars. You build more sidewalks, you get more pedestrians. And many
more
years
urban
ago,
sprawl, yes.
yeah, many years ago, we learned from the rest of the world who were not from the Gulf the advantages of the Sika, the small streets, where they are very well ventilated with the Venturi system effect. We were learning from the wind towers of the Middle East, but they see oil apparently has removed them from the concept of building. Any comments from you, sir?
Of course, this is not new. This is happening since the 50s with the introduction of urban planning master plans according to European points of view. And also the people were interested in leaving the traditional way of life behind and try to become modernized and westernized according to these master plans and urban planning. So the problem is that most of these philosophies or strategies or approaches are embedded in the legislations and building codes and urban planning laws. That's why the only way many architects and planners in this part of the world are trying to introduce these new traditional ideas into the planning and building design, but it's very difficult because they work against the legislation. So the only way that we achieve these ideas is by changing the laws themselves that were based on urban planning and building codes of the 50s or the 20th century that were imported from other countries through these master plans. And by time, they became part of the culture. So instead of the courtyard house, the villa is now the model of housing instead of the courtyard house of the past. The wide streets for cars are replacing the alfarij and the small alleys for human interaction and human activities. So the problem, as I see it, relies in the legislations that were based on Western points of view or urban planning principles that were transmitted by McFarlane Office of London, for example, to Kuwait Master Plan in 1952, the zoning, the neighborhood, the villa, all these elements are completely different than the traditional settlements or the Islamic cities of Al-Qasaba and the courtyard house and the Al-Farij and all these principles that used to be in the past. And culture adapts, culture change. It's not static. So then the generation that's living now, they see that these are taken for granted. These are common sense to have a villa, to have wide streets for cars. They cannot imagine living in environments that are similar to the past, while they might be more successful. But there are attempts through private developers to or bring back these principles into their schemes, like in Musharraf area in downtown Doha and so forth. They are doing some experimentation, but if it doesn't go through the law, the legislations, it will stay individual voluntary achievements. Yeah.
So maybe
Yeah,
while
thank you.
someone else is thinking of another question, I had a question for John. John, you spoke briefly about working with many different parameters, but in terms of the evolutionary optimization, you were more or less solving for one ultimate goal, which was the performance of the turbines. What's the next step? I can imagine that we might want to solve for a goal where it's not only the performance of the turbines, but also maybe views and shading, or maybe constructability and cost, and that it might not be the best wind tunnel or wind turbine performance that would guide in that case in order to get all three to be as optimal as they can be. So do you understand?
Yeah, that's of course true. When I was talking about the parameters, that was on the other end, where where you're trying to balance, your strategies for optimization. But even the project that I showed you, where the entire form was optimized, had multiple goals at the same time, and a lot of times you can get very interesting results using that technique, where you have multiple competing goals. I'm working on a project right now, balancing thermal and daylighting concerns on a passive facade, because both constraints will be pulling in opposite directions, and by finding the best balance between those, you can come up with some interesting strategies this way. So that's perfectly true. Yeah.
Are there any other questions at this point? The gentleman here in the center. Is there a microphone for him?
This is for John too. In the evolution process, what is evolving? Is it something that you have to input to the computer, or the computer will try to optimize itself? Number one. Number two is, if you study, for example, wind or light, it includes the entire year, 8,760 hours. Do you exhaustively study all the hours on one case, and then you move on to another case and study the entire year, 8,760 hours? Help us to understand that.
Sometimes it depends what your goal is, as you were saying. When you're doing a daylighting analysis, typically you would pick your worst case scenarios and you would pick points throughout the year to test instead of testing every hour throughout the entire year. But if you're optimizing for, say, daylight autonomy, then you can do a more simplified sky condition and actually simulate over the course of the year. You're trying to figure out when the daylighting needs are met, during what percentage of the year your daylighting needs are met. Yeah, that's also integrated into some of these projects. I mean, this one was about wind harvesting. I'm sorry, what was the first part of your question? Again?
You know, when you mention evolution, is the evolving element you have to tell the computer to model it, or is it in some sort of pre-program or mathematic parametric formula that the computer will regenerate itself?
Well, you have to constrain it. You know, otherwise it would. I mean, I'm sure. Unless you're putting the constraints on the facade, you know, you can get structurally impossible situations or that sort of thing. You set up the relationship between a sort of parametric study and the simulation software, and you tell it what it has to test for, and basically that agent system, which I talked about, is the control method whereby the parameters are translated into the geometry. But I don't think I can go into that right now. But if you want to ask me afterwards, I can elaborate.
I know there were a couple other hands up here in the front.
Yes, hello, Mark Garland with LCL in Toronto. Question for Chaanah Bahk. In your Ecolab building, what would have been the toughest green building point to achieve and one that you might choose not to do next time, as far as a cost-benefit basis and just
as I mentioned in the presentation, it was really important that all parties have to be involved as early as possible. One of the problems that we had was later decision making. It was decided to make a LEED Platinum building a little bit later on. Therefore, it was a little bit difficult to change the envelope concept. The envelope concept was already fixed. Therefore, we didn't have enough buffer to play with the envelope and to make a more efficient building facade. Therefore, the best way to make, in that situation, a green building was to apply triple glazing, which would increase a little bit more of construction costs. Therefore, it is really important that the decision making is to be done at the very early stage. And it is true that renewable energy technologies and high efficient appliances tend to cost more money. However, I do believe that in few years, those technologies will be widely applied and it will really drive down the cost factors. It is true that many building owners hesitate to practice green construction because of the cost. But then, as I said, with payback years of 10 plus 5 years, I think it is worthy for environmental sustainability. I hope I answered your question.
So the triple glazing is what you'd try to avoid next time?
No, that would be the best way. For the next future project that we are preparing right now, we are trying to apply double skin instead of triple glazing. So it depends on which side of the facade, either southern facade or northern facade, west facade. So triple glazing, so we are internally developing double skin facade ourselves in our research facility, which could have the same efficiency as the triple glazing. So it's not, a building doesn't become a green building to apply all kinds of technologies. As I said, as I said, it's really important to make the design synergistic, how you put each technologies together to produce a better efficiency.
Maybe while someone else is thinking of another question, I'll ask another one for Chaanah. One of the things that we're finding now when you achieve a certain level of sustainability in buildings is that you need to start to really look at the behavior of the occupants.
Yes.
That they become a much larger percentage of the, as you reduce the overall building energy, the amount of energy that the tenants are responsible for is much, much larger. Have you guys looked at sort of changing the habits and the lifestyles of the tenants of the building?
Since the occupancy of the building, we continuously train the building occupants. We train them about the green building technologies that have been applied. We have trained them how they should behave when certain indoor temperature doesn't satisfy them. And we have conducted many post-occupancy evaluation survey periodically for each season to look how they really react to our concept of green building. And there were partially building occupants who were unsatisfied with the air quality that we would have wanted. Therefore, it's really important to balance the, for example, the tenants' behavior and the building energy saving targets. So if you just only reduce the cooling load, it wouldn't satisfy the building occupants. So this POE surveys, I think it's very important so that we can reflect that to the operation method.
Yeah, this would be for John, I think. When you optimized for wind energy, what percentage of the building's total energy budget do you think you could achieve through wind power? Did you have an aggregate budget you were working against?
No, I didn't do that analysis, unfortunately.
Hi, my question is to Ms. Chaanah Bahk. In your presentation, you have mentioned that there was some 35-37% reduction in greenhouse gases.
Could you say it again? I didn't understand. I'm sorry.
There's some 37% reduction in emission of greenhouse gases. Yeah. So how did you quantify that in your project?
You mean 63% saving of water consumption?
No, there's some water consumption and there's some saving on energy. And
Energy.
the third part, the saving on emission of greenhouse gases, reduction of greenhouse gases. Yeah. So how did you calculate that figure? And what are the parameters you have taken for the emission control?
There is a calculation method how you estimate the carbon emission under the basis of energy analysis data that you have with heating load, cooling load. Under the data of load calculations, you could calculate the carbon emission, and that's how we did. And with the water consumption, the baseline is the baseline which is indicated in LEED reference guide. So the LEED reference guide states, for example, water closet has 1.6 gallons per flush, urinals how much, faucets how much. And if you calculate that and compare it to our building equipment, then we use 63% less water, and that's how we show the data. I hope you understood.
Yeah, thank you.
Again, this is for Ms. Park, for SK Chemical. I'm deeply impressed SK Chemicals Corporation's effort for energy saving and getting GVCC and LEED, all this clean energy. My question is, what will be most effective system among your variable options, like geothermal heat pumps and then triple window glazing, and what I've heard is UFAD on the floor air duct system, and then a green roof. Also, you adapted the atrium in the middle of the building, but what I've heard from recent newspaper, like a Seongnam City Hall, because of this atrium, wrong adoption of this atrium caused a very unpleased indoor temperature, especially in the summer for high temperature rising like that. How did you overcome this kind of phenomena in your this Eco Lab building?
Regarding the atrium, it is true that in summer days the space could be very warm. Therefore, we have applied micro louvers on the top of the glazing, and these micro louvers reflect the direct sunlight and only diffuses the heat, so that a very pleasant daylighting can only come through the space. And during the summer, fall and spring seasons, all the atrium windows will be opened for natural ventilation, and that will lead to pleasant ventilation. Was that the only question that you mentioned? Or
Okay. I understand, but there will be a much more complicated scientific, I think, measures on that and methods on that. And one of a distinguished thing, what I saw in your picture was the waterfall in the atrium. Did you get any benefit through that waterfall as far as energy is concerned, saving is concerned?
The wall fountain,
Yes.
It gives evaporation, so it balances the heat coming from the atrium. So the evaporation of water and the heat from the sunlight through the atrium, they balance a pleasant space cooling and heating. And for example, underflown ventilation system and radiant cooling and heating ceiling system, those both technologies have been recently applied in Korea, and I think it's the second building that those technologies have been applied here in Korea. We are still under evaluation during the occupancy years, and we are looking forward to more optimize their functioning. Yes, but we have seen many statistics in the other countries like USA or Europe that those technologies are very frequently applied.
I did not see any photovoltaic type of curtain wall system which is applied on the curtain wall system. Did you happen to use that system on the wall?
Did you mention photovoltaics?
Yes.
We have building integrated photovoltaics on the southern side, but we don't have photovoltaic on the roof. We have roof garden instead.
Photovoltaic was quite much helpful for energy saving, you think?
As I mentioned earlier, we couldn't change the building facade design so much. Therefore, we could only apply photovoltaic system which could only generate 10 kilowatts. And this 10 kilowatt of electricity is used for hand dryers in the toilet. So it doesn't generate so much electricity, but still to reduce energy, we have at least tried to gain certain amount of electricity.
And I saw one additional, I think this is my last question. I saw daylighting, fiber duct system to underground a parking lot area. You used daylighting system. Was it very effective versus to cost investment?
Actually, this daylight collector, it doesn't require so much high technology. We just need a duct.
I see.
Yes, so, and every building occupants find that very good because they don't need extra lighting during the day. Yeah.
Okay, it's a dual final. What is your object to get a 10 years feedback for payback your cost for this energy? Currently, you are saying that your calculation is 15 years. And what will make it 10 years? What kind of system improvement do you think will make it 10 years payback?
This 15% of total construction cost has been increased, firstly due to unfamiliarity with green building certifications. First of all, platinum certification of LEED requires a very high performance and high effort. And in Korea, at that time, LEED wasn't so widely used, and therefore consulting fees, so soft costs have had a proportion of 5%, and the rest was for greening the building. And therefore, this 15% at current situation, we would have payback years of about 15 years or plus. But since we have done and we have an experience and we are familiar now with all certification systems, we are striving for payback years of 10 years or less with 8% total construction cost increase. And we do believe that it will be achievable. And we have now experience with balancing each green technology that can produce better effect.
Did SK Chemical ever consider fuel cell system, adapting fuel cell, which gas make a fuel cell for electricity?
Did I understand your question right? If we have intention to use fuel cell storage?
Did you ever consider the system of fuel cell?
Yes, of course, but at the current situation, fuel cell is very, very expensive compared to their efficiency. Therefore, yeah, we might choose that for later future projects.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I think there was a question I saw earlier. Someone's hand was up on the other side. Maybe not. Not anymore. Maybe the question's been answered. Any other questions for the panel, for the speakers? Then I think we can give them a big round of applause. Thank you.